Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first meet and greet for 2021. And I'm Ruth Bennett, a board member at FPA and also a TV producer. And to get us started, I'm going to turn the program over to Colin Davies, and he also is a board member and a radio producer. So, Colin, take it away.
And it is my great honor to introduce Grace Cavalieri, Maryland's 10th Poet Laureate. Grace is the author of 26 books of poetry and 20 plays. Her last book of poems was What the Psychic Said, and her latest play, Quilting the Sun, was produced in New York in 2019. She has 3 books due for publication this year and next year, and her very latest book, hot off the press, is Grace Art, Painting and Poems. She's taught for almost 3 decades, and she founded and produces the program The Poet and the Poem, originally on public radio and now recorded at the Library of Congress. The program has been on air for 44 years, and in this program she's presented approximately 3,000 poets, including all the US Poets Laureates. No, what is the plural of Poet Laureate? Poets Laureate or Poet Laureate?
Poets Laureate.
Poets Laureate. Okay. She was responsible for Voices and Visions, the first primetime TV poetry program on PBS, and furthermore, she hosted the cable show On the Go featuring women poets. Those are just some of her radio TV productions. She's the founder of 2 poetry presses in DC, which I'm pleased to say are still going strong, and is currently the poetry columnist for the Washington Independent Review of Books. She has received many, many honors and awards, including 2 Allen Ginsberg Awards, 2 National Patterson Awards for Literary Excellence, a Penn Fiction Award, the Annie Award for Literature, and was named Humanist of the Year by the DC Humanities Council. As I said, these are just a few of her awards and honors. I think you get the idea of how much she has been feted. So, needless to say, we are honored and delighted to welcome Grace Cavalieri.
Wow, Colin, you make it sound fantastical, or else I'm very old. But I don't know where you did all that digging. You did some research, I'll tell you. Thank you very much. I am going to talk about poetry, and I'm going to talk about writing. And I am here to tell you that writers cannot do anything else. And why is that? It is because writing really brings us joy. And that is why we have to keep doing it, to get more joy. We're not obsessive. You see, happiness is very fleeting. I hate to tell you, you find a new sweetheart, you get a new car, a new condo. For a minute, a while, you're happy. Happiness doesn't stay around, but joy does. So that is what the artist has with creativity. It is really an animated blessing. So writers will keep going every day. And I also am among them. I asked my 6-year-olds, I was in the first grade this week, and I asked them what poetry was. And one little girl said, poetry is feeling. Oh, I was so happy. I thought she was going to say poetry rhymes. But I would like you to know what poetry means to me, and that is that it rinses off language. That is the big thing. In fact, I said to the 6-year-olds, what if you had to wear the same clothes every day, all year? Wouldn't they get kind of grimy and dusty? Well, words are the same way. If we did not have poetry, we would all sound like daytime television, which would be a horrible thing. And it is a way of sparkling and rinsing off language. You know, it permeates everyday life. You do not know how much poetry infiltrates the daily life. There was a film called The End of the Day. That happens to be a line from Yeats. And you cannot hear one day go by when a newscaster does not say, at the end of the day. So poetry has infiltrated our lexicon without even knowing it. And thank God for that. Another thing it does is it slows us down. You cannot read a poem in a hurry. You cannot write a poem in a hurry, and you cannot dream in a hurry. So it is a wonderful, especially for me, I am high wired. It doesn't hurt me at all to meditate into a poem every morning. And if we slow down, we appreciate nature more. We see more. We notice more. Like Buddha said, may you be awake one moment before you die. And the writer is very awake. The writer notices a piece of broken glass on the grass. Is it an emerald? The light on the leaf. All day long, noticing is like living twice. First, you get to see it, then you get to say it. Another thing that poetry does is preserve the beloved. This is the time-honored use of poetry from Petrarch's time. And I was asked to come to Paterson, New Jersey a couple of years ago to go into their classrooms and teach poetry to a population that was quite underserved and very deficient in resources. In fact, the security guard said he didn't want to go to the school with me. But the kids were sweet, and they were just like little limp flowers that needed hydrating with poetry. So I went around the classroom. I think this was fourth grade, and I asked each one who they would like to preserve. And the answers were quite beautiful. Each one told me someone, if they could write a poem, they would love to preserve. And so I wrote a poem about my experience, and it's called Poet in the Schools. And it begins, I will only read a couple of stanzas. If poets would not go there, who would? Who else would give the children back to themselves for the heart to report what the ear hears? We preserve the beloved. Raymond wants to preserve his father. He left us. He took care of me. He used to give me a bath. Luanda wants her baby sister, who is no longer here. Julio wants to keep forever his stepfather, who treats him equal, he said, like his other son. Here is a pencil. You can write by its light. Love is hard to live with. It is a bird flying against the wind. Here, take this pencil. I was waiting for you before you were born. All you have is what I give you, a poem that refuses to die. All I have is what you give me, the courage to try. Children, there is no one too young to find their interior lives and know what they feel. The final thing poetry does is makes us less lonely. Have you ever read an author and the author says something and you think, oh my gosh, I have thought of that, but I never said it out loud. Well, the writer says what other people just think. And it seems I have found that the tiniest secret about that we expose becomes the most universal thing that everybody knows, but hasn't said. And there's a saying that all that is buried is not dead. The writer unburies this. So I truly believe that writing lets you know that someone else feels the way you do, has felt what you do. We have all been betrayed. We have all been loved. We have all felt everything a person could feel. And then you know it when you read the poem. I would like to just say what I believe are the elements of a poem, because too often we don't mention this. And I begin by saying I was very influenced by Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, by his idea of a balanced life. And Jung said that a balanced life had 4 quadrants: the thinking part, feeling, sensual, and intuitive. I thought, wow, that is a perfect way to evaluate a work of art. So is your poem, is it dominant in the thinking part? Does it need more sensuality? So it's a great rubric for me. So I thought, what would life be without a thinking life? I mean, who would not want an intellectual life with ideas? What would life be without an emotional life? We in the poem do not say, I am sad, I am lonely. Rather, we would say, look at the bird on the branch, or look at the rock alone in the desert. So we can apply the same thing in theory. Intuition. In life, intuition tells you how not to step on someone's feet when you're talking to them, right? How little to say, how much to say. Same thing in a poem. How much do you trust your reader to put in an invisible bridge and let the reader supply something so it's not an axe in the head, so that you say just enough and not much more. Very hard to teach intuition, but the 4 elements: sensuality. What would life be if we couldn't taste peach pie or smell wisteria? Well, why would we want to send a poem out without taste, smell, sound, all of the senses? So that is another element I just thought was very important to mention. I am going to shift gears and talk about my passion for the last decade, and that is writing about women in history, because I can't believe that nobody was doing it. I went to graduate school in 75 after I'd had 4 children safely in their schools to get advanced degrees. And I studied 18th century literature, and I discovered Mary Wollstonecraft. Wow. Everyone knew her daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, because she married the poet Shelley, and she wrote Frankenstein, and she got all the press. Nobody knew her mother. Mary Wollstonecraft, the first woman to write a serious book in English of argumentative prose. There were other women writing frothy, romantic novels. Mary Wollstonecraft argued with Tom Paine, with William Pitt. She argued with the best of them. And she was, of course, hated by everyone, of course. Edmund Burke was the big philosopher in the 18th century, and he wanted her burned in effigy. Why? Because she wanted to start a school for girls. And she did. Newington Green near London. Colin probably knows where that is, actually. And so the men hated her. Remember this, at this time in history, the English law was that a man could beat his wife with a stick as big as your thumb. That's where we get the expression rule of thumb today. So that was the legality. And Mary, going against this, trying to get women some notice to just learn to read and write, she was just vilified. So I just fell in love with her. And it took 25 years after studying 18th century literature and history where I could not hold her in anymore. So I spent a year on her and wrote a book called What I Would Do for Love. And then I wrote a play. I always write a play after I write a book because I have the backstories and the characters already. So I wrote a play called Hyena in Petticoats, and Edmund Burke had called her a hyena. And I said in the play, Mary says, I am not a hyena because hyenas run in packs, and I am very much alone. And that play has been pretty well received. I'm going to read 3 poems in my voice because I take history and then I fictionalize it, but keep the facts correct. But I use my own voice to tell the story because I always think historians know what she did, but I know what she felt. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Dear Reverend Clare. And it is true, she was taught reading and writing by the Reverend Clare down the road in the village. In my play, however, because theater, you have to have more twists and turns and controversies, I have Reverend Clare a little more seductive and not so much interested in education. But for the poetry, we'll play it straight. And this is her voice, Dear Reverend Clare. You ask if hope gets me up in the morning. I say yes, not in your home where everything exists, but in mine where all things are lost. The top latch takes the way to the door, and so it is true as I teach Liza and Everina all that you teach me. You say my child's sense of wonder is coupled with a grown person's knowing grief, and why shouldn't it be? You are talking to a girl with a pencil hidden in a broken cup on top the highest shelf, stained by curdled cream behind a ceramic pitcher where it cannot be thrown away. So she goes to London with 12 guineas in her pocket. I mean, really, to be a writer. I would not go to New York with $1 in my pocket to be a writer. And in the 18th century, where women are reviled anyway, wow, you have to give it to her. Or else she was stupid, but she was strong. So luckily, she meets this publisher, Joseph Johnson. And if it were not for Joseph Johnson, we would not have the Vindication of Women. We would not have any writings by Mary Wollstonecraft. He took a chance on her, and he gave her a column in the London paper. First woman ever. Mid-18th century. So this is imagined what she would say to him. Mr. Johnson, uncommon kindness is what I call you instead of publisher. Telling me I am the first of a new genus? I tremble at the attempt. We must not, on any account, inform my brother or father, for ridicule has always been the unfriendliest advice. The October winds blow through London, yet I hear only your words exerting my mission. I must be independent. When a writer writes, the words are taken by the reader, but they always belong to the writer. This body, an unwilling recipient for spirit, finally fills with the breath of confidence because of you. My luck is changing. Today I stubbed my toe and to the breaking said, thank you, life. I feel something besides terror. I have a body, a mind, a heart. I invite the world to lay its head on my stomach and listen. Of course, she writes the Vindication of the Rights of Women, and it couldn't have been worse for her. She thought she was going to help women, and she made their lot worse. They went home and they were just absolutely punished for this. And so she felt, she thought at least she would find allies. And actually, she jumped off the London Bridge, and her skirts floated her up to the top, and fishermen found her. She could not find any support. When the book came out, this is a conversation, I imagine, in the town square. It's called Overheard Today. A vicious sound, famous lady with her book telling us how to act. I could not hear the rest and leaned in closer to the murmuring until she straightened. And then I saw she spoke of me, Mary Wollstonecraft. She held my book Vindication and shook it at her partner. My face flushed. Were it a man speaking, I would not crumble, but now I fear my dream is uninhabitable. All women are in danger unless we pick the bough from the tree ourselves. Yet a stranger was condemning me in a public place. Why not grant me the courtesy given male authors, saying, it is controversial? Her fury ascends in my body. She said I made her quest for survival all the worse. because I can read and write? Does that give me a masculine mind or just a mind? So that's my Mary, whom I love very much. And I feel that I was able to shine a light on her. There are a few more books about her now than they were in 1975. And she did get a great biography at one time. But I know my play is the only one on her. That's how long it takes. I do write about contemporary women as well. And I wonder if you remember Anna Nicole Smith. Well, after Mary Wollstonecraft, there was nowhere to go but Anna Nicole Smith, bless her heart. She was this blonde, she was a blonde model for Guess Jeans. And she had less connections or network in this world than anyone. I mean, if ever celebrity is tragedy, she is the typical tragic figure. She had no one but these handlers who stuffed her with drugs and propped her up and made her a buffoon. And I saw one reality show where they had her with a clown makeup on in a bathtub. Then I saw her after she had her baby on television, and I saw the beauty. I mean, she had no makeup, and I just saw this beautiful cheekbones and this vulnerability. And I knew what she could have been if she had ever been photographed for the right reasons. So my book, Anna Nicole, you might remember her. Blonde. I wrote a book. Well, I do admit she was a bimbo, and she is fun in this book. She is kind of quirky, but the play was in New York, and it was called Anna Nicole Blonde Glory. Get it? You can tell by the title that I changed the narrative. I made her, instead of die of an overdose of drugs, which she did, I gave her a happy ending. I gave her a doctor to marry, a baby. The writer can change the narrative, and that's a very, very powerful thing to do. So I know she's grateful. I'm just going to read one poem from this book, Anna Nicole Poems. Anna's Estate. At the Half-Star Hotel, the lower dip is painted bigger to match her dreams of being a star. She blessed the lumpy beds, bought her own silk sheets. This was before the moral issues, the legal issues, the spirit of the law, the letter of the law, the causes of death, junkies, drug addicts, probable criminal cause, bodies exhumed, frozen sperm, mystery sons, living in sorrow, wrongful death, undue influences. Before the opalescent oceans, where she could never find the truth in things, where she wanted a photo album so bad so she wouldn't die without memories. One day, standing at the free continental breakfast, dragging her sleeve in the jelly, someone walked by, touching her waist like a prayer, like an enfranchisement, and she was on her way, in a dress made for someone much smaller, trusting a stranger because he said, the good Lord can't see what happens in Hollywood. And thus she began the journey downward. So I also write about contemporary women. I helped to start a radio station in 1977. I started fundraising for it in 75 because I heard there was a new station to go on the air, and they wanted a drama and literature director. And I had been waiting to get poetry on the air because you could get 20 in a classroom or 200 in lecture hall, but 200,000? Really, I really hit up that manager. And he was a poet. So we went on air with poetry and with Sterling Brown's poetry and the A Train. So you can see what kind of a station it was. Well, it was an all jazz station, WPFW. It's still on. And it was the first Black managed public station in the nation. And it was a jazz and poetry station. So I met these fabulous jazz artists who came through. I met Now it's a different station, but in those days, the jazz artists came in. I met Betty Carter, I met Anthony Braxton, and I met Big Mama Thornton. This generation doesn't know her, of course, and of course, they don't even know jazz, which is America's classical music. But Big Mama Thornton was a big blues singer. And after I met her on the station, I went to her last concert, and I went backstage to talk to her. And this is what actually happened. This poem is called Big Mama Thornton. Last time I saw her, she wasn't so big. Actually, she was downright skinny, singing The Final Time in Washington, D.C. Backstage, she drank a quart of milk, mixed equal parts with gin. Seagram's, she told me. Then she got the idea. Could I contact the Seagram's people, and then she could advertise for them, and they'd like her for drinking a full quart a day of gin? I said, no, I didn't think so. And I didn't think the milk people would like the commercial so much either. She still felt bad about Elvis stealing Hound Dog the way he did, even though she was much too much of a lady to say so. Once she talked about it long ago, before she started milk with gin. I guess the drink left a sweet taste in her mouth. Who knows who Elvis Presley was today? Who knows that he stole Hound Dog and made millions of dollars, and Big Mama Thornton got not a penny? So I believe that every poem has a conscience too. And that's also another job of the poet. So I did this year go back and write a book about another 18th century woman. She has given me such a problem. First of all, her name is Madame de Staël, and she was the greatest woman in France. She actually was born the year after Mary Wollstonecraft died, but she was different. Mary Wollstonecraft was English and a Bohemian, and Madame de Staël was French and of Marie Antoinette's court, and she was very powerful. So I looked up 18th century writers, and I see all these names. No Madame de Staël. She's written novels. She wrote political treaties. She wrote plays. And Napoleon hated her so much because she was so powerful in her writing. He exiled her from Paris. And she spent the whole French Revolution on the run. And she has been a mess because she's very haughty. And I was having a hard time loving her. And nobody can love your writing more than you do. You can send it out. If you don't. If you don't love it, forget it. Nobody can love your work more than you do. And I was having a hard time loving her. But I finally finished the book, and I think, it's what it is. She's so mean, actually. I'll just read one poem. She slept with everyone, and Talleyrand, I could name all of them, actually. And she was liberated for sure. But she had a 20-year lover, although she was married, and he got secretly married and stayed as her lover, Benjamin Constant. He was a Swiss French activist against the against Napoleon. And so she hooked up with him, and he hung out with her all the time. And the men did not know whose baby she had. Constant thought it was his because it had red hair, but her husband had red hair. So, she sort of interested me there. So here's I've written a book in letters. I didn't know how to do the French Revolution. It was making me crazy. The royalists, the constitutionalists, the monarchists, so I just thought I'd go stay in the bedroom. So this is 1796, and it's to dear Benjamin Constant. For 3 years, you have been my faithful visitor. How could I have thought anything other as you stood beneath my window that first night? That time I opened the door that has never closed. All others pale in loyalty and tenderness. And I received your contract today, quote, to always love, referring to me as the most significant person on earth. The fact that I was the one who dictated your contract for you does not diminish its validity in the court of ecstasy. I signed my name after your name with a seal wet from my lips. We need no judge or magistrate to enforce the law that was already bound by our intimacies. Yet I honor the fact that you are willing to sign your life to me on paper. Now I am yours and you are legally mine. This is true. This is true. She actually read the contract and signed his name. So she was like aggressive. And that book is coming out in who knows, in about 6 months, I guess. So I'm going to end by reading a couple of poems about real life. That's me. And I'm going to end this talk by reading 2 poems about my husband, who we were married for 60 years, and he was a naval aviator and then became actually a world-renowned sculptor, metal sculptor. And he died a couple of years ago. And so I'm going to just read from one book, a poem called Heart Correspondence. That's actually an acupuncture point. And I thought, wow, what a cool name. These acupuncture points have beautiful names. Heart Correspondence. I take the tea, we place the cups side by side. The handles are turned, mine is on the right. You put the honey in, I stir it. I say, is there enough? You add more, a little milk. No cream, I say, more honey. You stir it, I stir it again, absent-mindedly, like living twice with this love, which has no need for memory. And finally, can I count on you? If I were lying in a boat in a wedding gown, would you see me floating by? If I named a star after you, would you lie in the grass looking up? If I lived in a white house, would you come sit on my front porch? If I were caught in a bad dream, would you please wake me up? If I had a plaid blouse, would you help me button it? If I could jitterbug, would you do the double dip? If I were a red cardinal, would you hold out a sunflower seed? If I caught all the fireflies in the world, would you give me a big jar? If the night nurse forgets to come, would you bring me a glass of water? If I have only minutes to look at the silky moon, will you come get me? Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.